Welcome to Connecting to Admired Leadership, where twice a month we explore the behaviors and routines that make great leaders extraordinary. I'm Wes Bender, and I have the distinct pleasure of hosting some of our firm's partners, coaches, and clients to discuss leadership in ways you won't hear anywhere else. Let's dive into this episode and make people and situations better together. We have with us Suzanne Peterson. So, Suzanne, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself by asking you the question, who are you? What do you love about what you do? Now, we believe that admired leadership is what you do at the end of the day. It's how you approach a room, how you walk into a room, and the behaviors and routines that you bring into that room, whether it's at work or in your family life as well. So, Suzanne, who are you? What do you love about what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Wes. And hi, everybody. Suzanne Peterson. I'm a partner at CRA Admired Leadership. I've been, working with CRA and then Admired Leadership in the firm for 17 years now. This might be my 18th year. So I've been living with this content and our approach and learning from my colleagues and our founder for many years now. What I love about what we do, for sure, it's going to be, and what I love about what I do every day, it's the partnership.
Mhm.
It's either partnering with clients to find solutions and answers, right? And that really is the key, right? We don't sort of just ask the question. We're not trying to get them to, bring the horse to water, so to speak, get them to come up with the answer. It's a true partnership of how do we work together to create the answers for the clients. Even with my colleagues, it's the creating solutions for clients together. And it's
Mhm.
that day-to-day partnership along with truly watching people change their behavior with
Yeah,
great results. And
yeah.
that's so important to what you said as well, Wes, because it's not about changing who people are. We're not in the business of doing that. We don't care to do that, nor would that even be successful. But leadership is what you do. And when we
Mhm.
change what people do with great results, we watch them just thrive and become better leaders in all aspects of their life.
That's awesome. So again, don't hear what we're not saying. Self-awareness, high emotional intelligence, some of these psychometrics that are out there as well, they are very important. But leadership, we have found over the last 30 years, you can actually pull behaviors and routines of the world's most admired leaders. Now, we're going to dig into a specific piece of content that I'm real excited to hear Suzanne talk about because I've never heard her talk about it before. This idea that why are some leaders praised stingy? But as we set the foundation for some of this real specific practical wisdom that we can give you, it's important that you understand what do we mean by an admired leader? Because this is a very important concept for us. We believe there are individuals out there, it's a very small percentage, the research and literature says, that excel at driving both performance. They knock goals out of the park, and at the same time, they excel at driving followership as well. They do both of those things. Now, there are individuals out there who do well at both, but admired leadership excels at both of those things. They drive performance and they stir energy in people. They inspire and motivate in a way that others don't as well. So that's what we mean by admired leaders. Over the last 30 years, when we talk about behaviors, we're talking about a behavior that we pull from these admired leaders by studying them, by interviewing the people that are around them, and those kind of things. And when we talk about some of these universal behaviors, there's three really important things to note. The first one is why I love leadership development so much. It's why I wake up on the side of the bed every morning. That's look what I get to do today. Because leadership is universal. It spans across every demographic, every psychographic, and every industry. At the same time, these behaviors can be explained in less than 5 minutes. I don't know how many workshops or trainings or you've attended before where there's a lot that's said, there's a big workbook that you get that gets put up on a shelf, when in essence, the nugget that you really needed could have been done in less than 5 minutes. These behaviors can be explained in less than 5 minutes. And the beauty of them is they're immediately actionable as well. So as we study leaders and we look for these practical leadership nuggets, we pull out all kinds of really neat concepts. One of those came out of a field note from last year. Why are some leaders praise stingy? So, kind of setting the stage for that, giving a 10,000 foot view of admired leadership. Suzanne, could you speak to that concept just a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely, Wes. And I think what's interesting is the parallel between thinking about, on the one hand, admired leaders are praise stingy. On the other hand, a most recent field note just talked about the more that a leader praises someone, the more people create outcomes worthy of praise.
That's
Those
right.
two things are not inconsistent.
Yeah.
The truth is, when admired leaders praise, right, they praise the right people in the right way for the right things. They might not do it that often, right?
Hmm.
But when they do that and they praise people and they praise the people to produce the certain outcomes that they do, they get amazing results out of those people. So
Yeah.
admired leaders certainly think praise is a worthwhile endeavor. At the same time, they tend to be fairly stingy with it for two reasons. One, again, they absolutely want it to be impactful. If
Yeah.
you're praising people all the time, always telling them, great job, you're a rock star, you crushed it, you're amazing, right? Way to go, right? Too much of that, eventually it loses its meaning and
Yeah.
importance. So, of
Yeah.
course, they stay quite stingy with it. When they're going to do it, they're going to really make it count.
Hmm.
But the other thing is, although leaders will and admired leaders will give praise, they're very good at distinguishing the difference between giving people praise and giving people positive feedback. Now, this is something we talk to leaders about a lot, and it's a good little lesson here as long as we have the whole group, which is admired leaders will think about praise again, very similar to compliments, flattery. Nothing's really wrong with it. Again, we would say admired leaders don't do it too often because
Hmm.
then people get used to it.
Hmm.
But it doesn't certainly doesn't hurt anything to say, Wes, amazing job.
Yeah.
But the truth is, Wes will sit there and say, I wonder what was amazing about it. So on the one hand, he goes, how do I know if she really even meant that? Because there's really no specificity around it. So it's easy to say good job, whether I mean it or not. It's easy, just language.
Yeah.
Two, he doesn't know what I thought was so great about it. So the difference between praise and positive feedback is the utility of the information. Again, please don't hear that we're saying praise is useless. There's a place for it, but it doesn't have the same utility. If
Hmm.
instead I say, Wes, amazing job with the webinar that we did.
Hmm.
Loved your energy. I loved
Hmm.
how you opened with two or three really insightful questions. I thought you did a great job facilitating through the audience. And I really like that you injected some humor throughout that. I really enjoyed the webinar. Now he not only feels that praise, but he knows exactly what I thought was effective. So then he continues and does more of that next time. He wants to even get better at that, increase his strength in those areas. It directs him. So I think that's really when we talk about admired leaders being praise stingy. It's not that they're stingy on positive feedback. They'll realize there's a time and place you go and give a lot of specificity. You tell people exactly what they need to do, continue to do, keep doing what exactly that you thought was effective. And then it reaches those two goals of saying, you really must have meant that because that was a lot of detail. I have to think you're meaning that or you wouldn't have said all that. Two, I know exactly what to do. And that's, I think, where the difference comes in is that they focus more on positive feedback than praise.
So you stirred all kinds of things in me just now, which I didn't anticipate on the call, of course, which is always happens on these calls, it feels like, because our coaches and partners are so good at digging in and this content's so practical. One thing you stirred in me, I know you were using me as an example, but I really felt good as you
Yeah.
were giving me that specific feedback, knowing you were just using it as an example. But it is amazing how specificity plays out into praise and positive feedback. The other one was my wife and I just a couple weeks ago had what I call an intense moment of fellowship. We don't have arguments in our house, just intense moments of
I'm
fellowship.
going to use that one.
And she said, Wes, you all, I love that you always see the bright side, but there's a toxicity to that. She had just got done reading the book Toxic Positivity. I don't know if you've heard of that or anybody's heard
Yeah.
of that before. And that element is so true. How leaders can come across either in their personal lives or in their professional lives as well if everything is on the bright side and they're never real specific about tensions and issues and those kind of things. They come across with a bit of a toxic positivity sometimes as well. I assume we see leaders all across the spectrum, correct? Who land all over the board with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is true. I mean, like anything, frame it in being stingy with praise or a toxic positivity. Too much of really anything can be problematic, but too much positivity, too much praise. At some point, people literally will say that you can't possibly be that positive all the time. You can't like you must have a, and they actually start to question that authenticity piece, which is something we always hear in coaching too, whether it's with our behaviors, does this feel authentic? Are you being authentic? Again, we try not to get too much into these labels and these types of things, but authenticity to us is really about consistency. How do you show up most consistently? Someone like you, Wes, most consistently, I've known you a long time now, right? And
Yeah.
you do show up quite positive. That's pretty consistent to who you are.
Mhm.
But I imagine you do have a bad day or two. And occasionally, it's like occasionally look on the downside of things, right? Just to have some of that realism as well.
So not only are these webinars fun to host and see who shows up and those kind of things, but I always get a little bit of coaching personally, I feel like sometimes too,
Yeah.
along the way, which is great. So I want to get to a couple of questions that came in. And again, if anybody on the call has questions, we're happy to take those. Again, we're answering the question, what's preeminent, what's unique about admired leadership? What space do we play in? How do we complement any other leadership development that's out there as well? And what I hope that you're hearing is just a very practical, research evidence-based approach to behavioral-based leadership. And what I hope you're hearing is how we go about that in conversation discussion, but we use this term dialogue a lot. And Suzanne, I didn't necessarily preempt you with this question, but could you speak a little bit to how unique our true dialogue is, this inquiry-based approach to things, because that's very important to our firm.
It absolutely is. And it's critical to truly to leadership development. It's
Mhm.
one of the things that fundamentally distinguishes training from development in our
That's
view,
good.
right? Training, skill-based, here's some slides, we're going to tell you things, right? Speaking engagement, here's the 5 things you need to know. Dialogue, the most common way to describe it, I think, that differentiates it from debate or from any other just discussion is going to be that there's no right answer. It's
Mhm.
asking questions of a group, right? They may be in their organization. And, if you were to ask a question, for example, to say, is this an organization that leans toward telling people the truth or just telling people what they want to hear? Is it a
Mhm.
truth or a harmony organization, do you think?
Mhm.
That naturally, there's no right or wrong answer to that, right? It's a dialogue question. It gets people talking about, well, I think this, and it isn't about debating, no, you're wrong and right. It's not a place for debate. It's not a place where we're getting to solutions. It's a place
Mhm.
to get people talking about it. And
Yeah.
through a question like that, when people maybe say it's a harmony organization, I don't think people will tell people the truth, then a coach can come in and facilitate through here's something that admired leaders do. And a
Mhm.
little bit of a content or a behavior can come in. But the goal is not, here's 5 behaviors. The goal
Mhm.
is, let's get you talking in the real world of your organization, your team. That's a really interesting question, that one I just posed, and one we ask a lot of teams. Because if they are a harmony-based organization and no one tells each other the truth, there's fear there. But the
Yeah.
truth is, you know what the answer is? They don't know how to give people feedback that's honest without hurting the relationship. We know that admired leaders know how to do this. They know how to be really candid, at the same time elevate the relationship so that that feedback doesn't hurt, doesn't harm the relationship, doesn't make people feel evaluative, doesn't make them feel small.
Mhm.
So now we can introduce a behavior for them to
Mhm.
say, how would this work here? How would you,
Mhm.
give that exact message to somebody else using an admired leadership behavior? But the
Mhm.
whole thing's based on creating conversation between the participants in their world. Facilitator takes a bit of a backseat.
It is amazing what a game changer it is to implement just one small behavior intentionally
Yeah,
into anything that's out there. And our admired leadership, we have uncovered hundreds of these universal, can be explained in under 5 minutes. You can do them right now types of behaviors as well. So let me get to one of our questions from the McDonald Center out in Notre Dame. This tags back to kind of our topic at hand. How can a leader inspire other managers who don't think praise is important or feel that it isn't their personality to authentically praise those who work for them? Now, I bring that up because that really tags exactly into the conversation that
yeah.
we've been having so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the question. I always appreciate these questions because it is true. You say, I have a group of leaders that I think don't want to give praise, but I think people need praise. But
Mhm.
two things that came up in that question. One, remember, whether they have a praise type of praise personality, whether we really kind of want to stay away from that. We can't change personality. We're not in the business of doing that. Yes, people have tendencies, of course. Naturally, some people give more praise than others. Maybe that's who they are. But the idea here is, how do we convince people? I think praise in particular is a word that assumes you have to be this effusive
Yeah.
compliment, flattery. You're
Yeah.
amazing, high-fiving people, right? Fist bump.
Yeah.
And so they go, that's just not my personality. And remember, how you give praise probably is based a little bit about your personality.
Mhm.
But the fundamental way of saying, how do you recognize people? People want to be recognized for the things that they do. So the
Mhm.
first thing I tell somebody that really just praise does not seem to be their thing is, don't tell them to give praise, because they're looking at that as a certain way of giving it. Tell them, how do you, again, question, how do you recognize your people? How are you going to
Mhm.
make them feel recognized? And maybe instead tell them, let's give them, don't think about praise. How about giving them positive feedback? Right?
Mm.
Can you each day tell them one thing in particular they did well? It doesn't have to be, you're awesome, which is, I think, what people think, like, I'm just not a praise person, or that's very American, right? The praising. Other cultures in particular, and we have people from around the world will often say that, like, oh, these Americans always need praise, and it's such an American thing. And I say, hey, don't do it. Be praise stingy. You're in good
Yeah.
company. Admired leaders are often praise stingy, but they do give positive feedback, right? And they
Mhm.
do it in the way that is consistent with their style and even their
Mhm.
personality, right? They're going to
Mhm.
do that very differently.
So I want to dig into that just a little bit more and pull out this idea because one of the things you mentioned in that question is people often hide behind, that's just not my personality,
Yeah.
right? And there are behaviors that are perhaps industry specific, behaviors that are specific to certain personality types, different psychometrics that are out there, certain behaviors that work in specific demographics, whatever that may be as well. But there are also hundreds of admired leader behaviors that work universally across the board. Could you just speak real quick? Because I feel like that's something we get all the time. That's just not my personality, or I'm a NR, QFG on the Myers-Briggs, or hey, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so that's just not me. What do we say? What would we say to those folks who are perhaps hiding behind, and hiding behind is probably not the right word. They're more limiting themselves to the better leaders they could become. What kind of a
Yeah.
response would we give to those folks?
The response typically is that, again, we're going to endorse. We're not, we love who you are. We're fine with who you are. We love, that's at the core of all diversity, is that we're all quite different, and we will approach and communicate quite differently. This we don't even want to touch. So when somebody says, I just don't think I'm really a praise type, and that's not my personality, we say, how you do it, or the thought process around giving praise, again, that's fine. But all leaders need to make their people feel recognized in some way. So we
Mhm.
immediately will go into, another example could be, I'm kind of conflict averse, so feedback's hard. Well, as a leader, you still have to give feedback. Well, maybe I can give you a way to do it. How admired
Mhm.
leaders do this is a little different. But
Mhm.
also really pushing back on people, just because you're a certain person or personality or whoever your authentic self is, doesn't mean you shouldn't grow or change or
Mhm.
develop. Right?
Mhm.
All of us could say, there's a level of comfort zone to say, I do want to be a better leader. I need to engage in not a new personality, but I
Mhm.
need to engage in a few different behaviors. So going with a person like that, whether it was praise specifically, and talking about, go through some of your people, tell me what they do that you'd like to recognize, right? That you
Mhm.
feel they deserve to be recognized for something that they do particularly well. Let's
Mhm.
talk about how we recognize them,
Yeah.
versus keeping them in this, you have to become a praise type of person, right, in
Yeah.
order to be effective. It just doesn't
Yeah.
resonate, and not very effective.
So one of the things you mentioned, which gets at a question, we've got Mike from the Texas A&M Business School. I see he logged in and sent in some questions ahead of time as well. And one thing you mentioned was, hey, can we give you a better way to give this praise? And that tags to his question, which is there a daily or weekly practice that would increase praise giving for a leader systematically? Is there something that we could put into the rhythm and culture of our weekly, daily routine that would help to fuel this in some ways?
I actually work with one leader that this is hard for him to remember. I mean, he's a high performance driven leader. So everything is rooted in performance, right? So it's really easy for him to be critical, very hard for him to be positive. And as we know about admired leaders, they really try and be balanced. I don't mean just in the conversation, but in general. Like if you're somebody who gives negative feedback, or even if it's constructive criticism, 3 times a day, but you give positive feedback once a week, right?
Mhm.
You're going to be unbalanced. So he was very unbalanced. Literally, what he did is on his tracking system, and in our, making the time to lead module, we talk a lot about a tracking system. But he now has a category that he tracks, and he calls it positive feedback slash praise. You know what his system is? Do I praise or give positive feedback to one person a day in my life
Mhm.
just
Yep.
to create the discipline? Now,
Mhm.
by the way, remember, admired leaders, they cross boundaries of their life. So
Mhm.
sometimes maybe it's his daughter, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it's his spouse, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a parent, right? It doesn't always have to be the people at work to create the discipline and the habit.
Mhm.
Right? So if you want to become a leader who, maybe you say in 2024, I want to be a leader who, recognizes people a little bit more, whether
Mhm.
that's through praise occasionally. I'm going to be stingy on it, but that's going to be who you are anyway. So it'll be easy for you to be in good company with admired leaders. Or maybe you just need to be a leader that gives more positive feedback. How hard would it be to find one person in your life a day and put it on a list and track it?
Yeah,
Right?
that's good.
And a lot of us do those types of things here to remember
Mhm.
because, you get busy with work and driving performance and you just kind of you forget that that's an important piece of what you do as a leader.
Yeah. So there was probably six different concepts in what you just said that we could each pull out and take another 30 minutes on if we really wanted to. One of those you heard Suzanne say, a tracking list. And that's a very important piece to systemize a lot of what we do in our relationships and all those kind of things as well. Now we only have 4 minutes left. Suzanne, I'm going to give you the kind of the final words at the end to just any words of wisdom you would give to anyone on the call. Again, the goal of the call today is not to fill out any particular concept. We only have 30 minutes, but really to give you a taste, as well as some good practical nuggets. Those of you who are on the call who are using this as individuals or teams, to really fuel some discussion with those you're in influence with as well. One thing I want to be sure to mention, we are having conversations every single day with folks all over the world. Their understanding and value of admired leadership behavioral approach, their need as it relates to could behavioral approach to leadership really move the needle forward, and of course budget as well. At the intersection of that, we know at the end of the day, how do leaders get better? They engage with world-class practical content and they have dialogue around that content. Practical content that's universal, explained another 5 minutes, can be implemented immediately, and they have dialogue, and that dialogue galvanizes it. So one of the things, Suzanne, you heard underneath some of the things that she's saying, it galvanizes it in a way that it comes across as authentic, right? The leader who's trying to do better at praise, one praise a day that they track over the course of a couple or 3 months, that begins to become more subconscious to them. It truly becomes part of who they are at the end of the day. And we see that over and over and over again, and it becomes much more authentic. I've dropped in the chat box there. Anybody who might be interested would love to have a conversation with you, hear more about you, the people you lead. We develop custom scopes of work. We don't have, hey, here's our curriculum, or here's our 6-step process, or even here's our book, or anything like that. We develop custom scopes of work that are highly relational, highly customized as well. It's my favorite thing I've ever been able to do is wake up and have conversations with leaders all over the world. Those of you from Scotland, Germany, across the world who are probably at a weird time joining, but set aside, we're very glad you're here. Those of you who are listening to the recording as well. Suzanne, I'd love to give you any final words, any final thoughts for those who've joined us today.
Yeah, I think my, final words would really, one thing I didn't say is I have an academic background. So I say I had a long career in academia before coming to CRA Admire Leadership. And I obviously really value my academic training and background. And I was one of those people really focused in, it's authentic leadership and servant leadership and ethical leadership and transformational leadership, all good theories. And coming here, what I realize is that just wasn't actionable enough for the basic leader in organizations. And so truly, being a part of Admired Leadership, what it's done for my life too, anything that involves relationships, Admired Leadership helps you. I'm a better parent, I'm a better friend, I'm a better daughter,
Yeah,
I think I'm a better colleague. So it just, a fantastic way to engage, just help your whole life. Admired Leadership just, it's changed mine, and I think it changes most people's, right, that are
that's
part of it.
awesome. That's
Thanks,
awesome.
Wes.
And I'm seeing some questions we did not get to there. So I'm going to drop one more time my meeting notes. I definitely have some great resources to point to Donald, Daniela. We've got actually several fire departments and agencies like that that have come in, Donald. So I'd love to speak to you specifically as well. We're at the top of the hour. We're at our time. Where you logged in, where you signed up for these, there are more to come throughout the year. So we do these twice every month. Would love to have you rejoin, but even more so, we'd love for you to forward that out to folks too. Folks would love the leadership conversation. Folks on your team who you want to spur this kind of conversation in your meetings and those kind of things. We would absolutely love to have you as well. So Suzanne, special thanks to you. Hope you have a great rest of the day. All my best to everyone all over the world as well, and have a great weekend, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks.